All right, good evening. My name's Donna Maxey and welcome to Race Talks. So let's try that one more time. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you very much. I'm an elementary school teacher. I expect a response. So I'm really excited to have everyone here tonight. This is really kind of my dream, my baby, to have Race Talks, and it's come to fruition. So it's very exciting. We have a great topic tonight, the law and racial ethnic profiling. We have a great lineup of speakers. First speaker will be Dan Handelman with CopWatch, Portland CopWatch. Thank you very much. And the second speaker will be Michael Reese, Chief of the Portland Police Bureau. So Dan's kind of going to give you an idea of what racial profiling is and what the history has been. The chief will talk about what's happening in Portland and the police response. And Casey Jama is from the director of the Center for Intercultural Organizing, and he is carrying some legislation about racial ethnic profiling. So he will be discussing that. Before we get to that, we have a few little important things to discuss. My favorite discussion is the restrooms are across the hall from these two doors, so know that. There is beer, wine, pizza. You can order off of a special menu at the back from McMenamins, who is our wonderful sponsor. And McMenamins has made all of this possible, along with Uniting to Understand Racism, who provides facilitators. So we're really excited, and without those two entities, we would not be doing it. We also have facilitators provided by Resolutions Northwest and the City of Portland. Kofi, helping here, the City of Portland, what? City of Portland, what do you call it? Dialogue? What? All right, City of Portland, Office of Equity and Human Rights. Gotcha. I should know that. I'm on the Human Rights Commission. Okay. All right, so some housekeeping things. On your table, you will see some cards. These are not just for color decoration. These are because we need to get to know each other. You'll also see one of these. These cards are for people who don't have a business card. You know, people say, oh gosh, I'd give you my number except I don't have a card. Well, now you do. All right, and the other thing is follow-up activities for this next month. And I'm going to read this because this is really important, and it's what Race Talks, what we're trying to do with Race Talks, is get people to get to know each other. I moved to St. John's, and I thought, gosh, these people are not real friendly. And then we had a street party, and I found out that I was the only black person on the street. But they were just not friendly with me. Some of those people lived there 28 years in that neighborhood and didn't know each other. So one of the questions is, how many people of color or different ethnicities are on your speed dial as your real friends, not your person of color or your white friends? So when I say your speed dial, I mean you call up to say, hey, I got fired, got a new lover, you know, let's go out to the movie. That's what I mean by your speed dial. And because of my experience in St. John's, I said, just for fun, go out and make friends with a person in your own ethnic group. So do that. And make a person of friends with a person of color or a white person if you're a person of color. Find a mutual interest, and this is really important. Find a mutual interest and discuss it over coffee. Hint, don't discuss race until you have established a real relationship. This may take months. You would not ask someone you just met, how much money do you make? So you should not ask someone about race. That's really, really personal and private. You can share the contents of Race Talks. If you have been at Race Talks and you've made a person here, then you can share that. That'll give you a point to start speaking. And join a Uniting to Understand Racism dialogue group. These are a 6-week group, and they're real important. You made it louder.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Ooh, there you go.
How do you like me now? Now this is a first, asking me to speak more and louder. Okay. So join a Uniting to Understand Racism dialogue group. They are 6-week groups. They're very interesting. I mean, I've been a person of color for, several decades. And I learned a few things at these groups. So I think it's really important to do that. Additionally, we have some paperwork we need you to do. Need you to do a sign-in sheet. If you have not done a sign-in sheet, please make sure you do. There are sign-in sheets at each table. There were some at the front, and there's my responsible people, please stand up. Please stand up responsible, because see these two people, don't they look responsible? All you people on the wall, make sure, and back there at the back, make sure you sign one of the sign-in sheets with one of these folks, please. And this is the evaluation form we need for funders. If you don't fill one of these out, I will tackle you at the door. So please make sure you fill one out and leave it on the table. We really need this feedback from you. Alrighty, and on the back is a United and Understand Racism sign-up sheet if you're interested in a dialogue group. Let's see, bunch of stuff to discuss here. Okay, here's the Race Talks brochure, and we have two Race Talks now. We have Race Talks tonight, and we have Race Talks 2, which is the actual kind of reverse. It's the first Tuesday of the month at Jefferson High School, and we had our second one. And I'm very happy to report that we had about 65 people at this second one, so I was really excited about that one. So the next month for Race Talks will be, go ahead, clap. So next month at Jefferson in the cafeteria, 6:30 to 8:30, the topic will be the Arab-Muslim experience. So last time we did it, we had Muslim Arab men. This time we're having women. So it should be very exciting. And if you look on the calendar for Race Talks, next month is interracial couples. And I used to be one of those. I have a husband now. And so I'm no longer one of those. But I do, since I have a husband, I'd like to introduce my daughter, Shayna Pomerantz. Shayna, would you please stand? I'm really excited. She's here on break from law school. So, and gentlemen, she's single. And she's pretty. She's married to the law right now, but give her a couple more years and she'll be single for real. So anyway, you know, some mothers are shameless, aren't they? They have no clue. That's all right, the girl is sharp. I like that. Never mind, go on, Mom. Anyway, so what we will send out the Google group. We're going to get out a Google group, and I am looking forward to you all signing up if you qualify to speak at one of these next Race Talks. I have microaggressions covered, but the interracial couples, cross-cultural communication, we need you talking about race, need some people, racial stereotyping, need some people, got the race in the arts. But we need you to be a part of this. So please, if you're interested, put that on your evaluation form. All right. And for teachers, since I'm cutting in with the school district now, if you're a teacher, are there any teachers here? Raise your hand. You can get PDUs, 2 PDUs for tonight. So they're back there on the back table, so you'll need to fill out what it's for, but it's signed by me and Lorenzo Poe. And if you're not in Portland Public Schools, take one anyway and see if you can get credit for having done this. Couple of things that are happening that other people wanted me to share. I'm working with Roosevelt High School on their program. They have a writing and publishing center. And how many of you have ever wanted to be a writer and have your story published? Good, and this is your chance. On this sheet, they are collecting stories. They'd like to get about 20 or 30 stories from people of different ethnicities, ages, all different kinds of interests. And the high school students are going to be publishing it this summer. So please take one of these and give Kate McPherson a call. Additionally, the City Club of Portland is having a conversation with Lois Levine. She's an educator and author of The Secrets of Mary Bowser, it's based on the true story of a woman born into slavery, freed and educated in the North, who returned to the South and became a Union spy. So that's tomorrow night, 6 o'clock at Allen Temple CME Church on 4236 Northeast 8th Avenue. Now, a really important thing is the other night I went to a meeting, and it was about Keaton Otis's father was sponsored, and I've got my thing here. I can't find it. Anyway, on your table is a postcard. That's Fred Bryant in the top right corner, and this truly is a small world. I found out that my sister went to high school with Fred's mother, and I dated Fred's uncle in high school. So we're almost related, Fred. So Fred, please stand. Fred is Fred is the father of Keaton Otis, who was killed about 3 years ago. And to Fred's credit, and I know this is really hard for a parent, every month he has a vigil over near Lloyd Center to commemorate the passing of his son. And some of you might remember that case. If you don't, then you might want to look it up on Google it. But Fred was asked to come back and speak in New York at a conference, and I thought they paid for you to come. He has to pay for his own travel. So tonight, I told him that we would, whatever money we made from the raffle, and asking people to please donate. If each of you donated $5, he would have more than enough to go back to New York to speak at this conference. And based on the sacrifice that he has made, I think $5 is not much to ask. So please do that. So we have our lovely raffle ticket person back here. Stand up, please, so they can all see you. Go back, 6 for $5 and $1 a piece. All righty, we have Race Talks t-shirts, 20 bucks a piece. Very nice, so please get one of those. All right, have I done all the commercials?
Yeah.
I think so. And once again, evaluation, fill it out. All righty. I'd just like to open up this evening's topic with, there's a great article that was written in the Oregon Historical Quarterly. It was written by Dr. Karen Gibson and Leon Cerullo. It's called Black and Blue. And the article is very, very interesting. I just wanted to read a couple of quick paragraphs for you. It says, contemporary perceptions of the police are similar to sociologist Robert Staples' 1975, that the police oversaw inhabitants of colonial wards in order to reinforce the status quo in race relations. And the police, very honestly, I have to say, I applaud them for getting up every morning to go to work, because I wouldn't want to do that job. That is a difficult job. They're being sent out, their loved ones don't know, and they don't know if they're returning home. And the last time we had a gathering for the IPR, unbeknownst to the audience, one of the officers who was in the audience, his son, who was a police officer also, had been attacked and was in the hospital that evening. And he left very upset because he felt maligned. And so let me say this first, that the purpose of this evening is for us to hear what racial profiling's history is, to find out what the response is from the Portland Police, what their plans are. Let me say it is better than it used to be, but it still has a long way to go. Not just here in Portland, but everywhere else. And then to find out what we can do to help it with the legislation. I would like to say, the last time at the fluoride talk, we had some people who kind of forgot their manners a little bit when some of the people were speaking. And I don't mean they had gas. So I would like for all of us to remember that these people have come here to speak, to enlighten you, and to be polite. We can disagree without being disagreeable. So, and if someone can't quite remember that, McMinimans has bouncers. So, okay, so just a little bit about the article. This article adds to the work by chronicling the history of the black community's attempt to reform policing in Portland's Albina district and the subsequent fierce resistance the community encountered from rank-and-file officers, police commanders, and elected officials. The story begins in the mid-60s when policing became a major civil rights issue in Portland, and ends in 1985 with the murder of black Portlander Lloyd Tony Stevenson at the hands of police. In Portland, 3 issues have been the objects of police reform: reduction of police brutality, increased civilian oversight of the police, and increased Black representation in law enforcement. And I can say unequivocally that all of those have improved. They are all better, but they are not best. And that's what we want you to do. Facilitators, in your envelopes, there is an agenda, and also there is paper, so that when we have our discussion groups, you can, there are 7 questions on the back that I developed with the aid of Baruti Athari, who is from the mayor's office. And so I really hope that everyone will look at these questions after hearing the speakers and come up with some suggestions for the mayor's office. So before I introduce our panel, I would like to introduce Baruti Athari from the mayor's office.
I just want to thank you all for coming out to participate in this discussion. I want to thank Donald Maxey, McMinimum, for participating in this. I think a dialogue around race is a very courageous discussion because we know a lot of times the conversation around race is either in a whisper or it's in a scream, and a dialogue is someplace in the middle. Like what Donna said, we're going to talk in the middle. It's not a whisper and it's not a scream. It's in the middle. And I also want to reinforce that Mayor Helps has made public safety one of his priorities of his administration. He recruited me to work with him on public safety. We've been doing that. There's a lot of good people I've been working with inside the Bureau, a lot of good people in the community. A lot of you have given me a lot of good advice. It's appreciated. The good work that's done here will not be lost. Thank you, and glad to be here.
Our first speaker is Dan Handelman. Dan is a peace and social justice activist. He helped co-found 2 organizations with which he still works: Flying Focus Video Collective, which has been producing video for social change since 1991, and Peace and Justice Works, focusing on educational programs regarding peace in the Middle East, the Iraq Affinity Group, and police accountability, Portland Cop Watch, which was founded in 1992. As a member of Portland Cop Watch, Dan sits on the steering committee of the Albina Ministerial Alliance for Justice and Police Reform and co-chairs that group's training and policy committee. I present to you Dan Handelman.
So Orlando, if you could get the slideshow going there. So I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. Am I close enough to the microphone? How's everybody tonight? All right. A little bit warm. So can you start the slideshow? Get that on the full screen. So I don't know if people are familiar with what that is on the screen right there. It's not the greatest picture. That's a Martin Luther King quote. It says, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Do people know where that is? That particular iteration of it? It's at Central Precinct downtown. It's on the Justice Center. So I'm hoping that police believe in that because it's on their building. We believe at Portland Cop Watch that everybody should go home safe at night after incidents with the police, that the police should go home safe and the citizens should go home safe. We founded Portland Cop Watch as a means to promote police accountability through citizen action. We have a tagline that says that we would like to see a police bureau that's free of brutality, corruption, and racism, and every chief that we've met with since we started has agreed with that. So presumably we're all on the same page. And so we have been working on this for a long time, particularly focusing on educating people around their rights and trying to let the community know what's going on to the extent that we can find it out. And so I'm going to share with you some information about racial profiling that we've learned over the years. So here's the first slide. This is the Police Bureau's definition of what we call racial profiling. They call bias-based policing. And the language says, members are prohibited from taking any police-initiated action that relies on race, ethnicity, or national origin rather than the behavior of an individual or information that leads the police to a particular individual who has been identified as being or having been engaged in criminal activity. And I underline any police-initiated action because when most people think about racial profiling, they're thinking about traffic stops. So what's important is that this is not only about traffic stops, this is about all sorts of police-initiated actions. And we're going to take a look at that. Racial Profiling Committee was created in 2007, and I sat on that. It was underneath Mayor Potter and Chief Sizer. And it was a bit of a contentious group because some of the police officers who were part of that group did not want to use the word racial profiling. It was when it came to that, they would say, you're calling us racist, they would fold their arms, and gives excuses including information such as black people commit more crimes. And I'm not going to address that issue tonight. I just say if you haven't read Michelle Alexander's book about the new Jim Crow, you should, and I'm not going to debate that point right now. Yeah. That round of applause. The Racial Profiling Committee was eventually replaced after Chief Sizer created this plan to address racial profiling, which is still in the process of being implemented by the Human Rights Commission's Community and Police Relations Committee. And next slide, thank you. When they were presented with the traffic and pedestrian stops data last year, Sergeant Stewart, who's here tonight, came with this slide, and this was an official Police Bureau slide that showed possible reasons why there's such disparity in the percentages of people stopped by the police and the percentage of African Americans in the community. And what it shows is that some possible reasons might be institutional racism, implicit bias, and what I would call over-policing, what's listed here as police tactics and hotspot policing. And to go from a city where the police were saying, you're calling us racist, to a city where the police are presenting, it is possible that there's unbiased, unconscious racism going on, and maybe why this is happening is a big step forward. So I want to contextualize these statistics you're going to see tonight by acknowledging that the police have made steps, at least in the language that they're using, but let's head on from there. So the next slide, please. So the average percentage of post-traffic stops over the years since 2004, and I remind you, for all these statistics I put at the top, that African Americans make up 6% of the population in Portland, okay? The average percentage of traffic stops is 13%. So it's twice the representation in the population for African Americans. And there's some talk about, oh, the police couldn't see what the race of the person was when they pulled the car over. I'm going to address that again in a second. But then the question is what happens after they're stopped. So next slide. This is the searches, discretionary searches, which means if an officer makes an arrest or tows a car, they have to do a search. Those are mandatory searches. These are the discretionary searches. And the percentages you'll see for white people is about 4% every year, whereas the percentages for African Americans and the Latinos, the colors didn't come out quite right on this projector, but Latinos are in the middle between whites and African Americans. Don't fare very well either. But the average for African Americans is about 9%. So more than twice the rate of discretionary searches. Next slide, please. So then what gets found on those searches, in contraband that is found, you'll see that the white bars are much higher. That contraband is only found on people of color about 80% as often as they're found on white people. So I can only conclude that people of color are being over-searched in the city. The good news is that the percentage of contraband found is going up, which means that the police are actually doing a better job searching people when there's a reason to search them. But they're still searching people of color too often and not finding as much contraband. All right, so let's go back again. Next slide, please. So that's 13% of traffic stops. And we're not even sure that that's an accurate number because in the last couple of years, next slide, please, the percentage of unknown or other race that has been put down by the police officers who enter this data into their computers when they do a stop started at 2% in 2006 and slowly went up. And last year, the last time we have statistics is 2010, by the way. The new ones are coming out next month, I understand. But it's gone up slowly. Now 28% of the entries are unknown. And I'll let you speculate why an officer might not want to write down the race of the person they stopped. I'm not going to assign anything to it, but I had my suspicions. All right, next slide, please. So again, so 13% of stops. And they say that at nighttime, that's when the traffic stops more traffic stops are made of African Americans because they can't see who's driving it. It may have to do with driving patterns and whatnot. All right, well, let's give the police that. Next slide, please. Why then are the pedestrian stops 23% of the number of stops? because I know it's overcast here a lot, but I think that's not really an excuse for why you can't see the race of a person on a bicycle or on foot. So that's a kind of alarming figure. That's 4 times the average, the representation in the population of African Americans. Next slide, please. Shootings and deaths, the most serious action a police officer can take. And this includes shootings where people didn't get hit with a bullet, where they got wounded, where they got killed, and deaths in custody. 25% of those cases in Portland, or 4 times the representation of African Americans in the population, happen to African Americans. Next slide, please. And overall, people of color, 33%, in a city that's 76% white, are the subject of police shootings and deaths in custody. Next slide. The same percentage as the shooting for African Americans is the number of arrests for African Americans, 25%. Next slide, please. And the use of force, now we haven't seen a report about use of force published since 2009, but the statistics then show that 29% of the uses of force happen in the city against African Americans by police officers. That's 5 times the representation of the population. Next slide. The pointing of firearms, which is very serious. We're 1 slide ahead where I wanted to be. Great. It's a very serious incident. Who takes gun classes knows you don't point a gun at somebody unless you are planning to actually use it. That's 34%. So now we're at 6 times the representation of the population. And this is a very serious issue that the African American community brought forward, and Portland started tracking this statistic because of concern in the community. So we're tracking it, but the numbers aren't going down. Okay, now we can go to the next slide. So there are several policies and laws that have been created that are enforced unequally. And one of them is the gun exclusion zone. And this is something that Mayor Adams set up to exclude people from areas where lots of gun crimes are happening. If they commit a gun crime in that area, then they're going to be arrested and then excluded. So the arrests in those areas are 52% African Americans, according to a report that went to council last year. And now, next slide. The people excluded from those areas, 86% African American. And I asked the Oversight Committee, why do you think that's happening? They said, oh, well, we started in neighborhoods that are mostly African American. I said, there is not a single neighborhood in this city that's 86% African American. I'm sorry. So again, something to look at. In previous years, there was something called drug-free zones downtown, where it's sort of similar to the gun exclusion zones, where if you were arrested for a drug crime, the police could then exclude you from the area. And Mayor Potter put an end to that because 55% of the people being excluded during that era were African American. He felt that was being enforced racially in a racially biased way. So recently they started a new program similar that's called the Illegal Drug Impact Area. So next slide. And the people who are being arrested there are 39% of the people who are convicted for crimes in those zones now are African Americans. And next slide. Then after you get excluded, if you are found back in that area and you get a trespassing citation, if 55% of the people who are getting those citations are African American. So I asked myself, why do you think officers might recognize the people who are coming back into these areas who are African American as opposed to the ones who aren't? My only guess would be skin color. Again, this is just speculation, but I think that it's something serious that we need to look at. The service coordination team is yet another one of these programs that disproportionately affects African Americans. And service coordination team, our explanation of it, I'm sure it may not be 100% the way other people would describe it, is something where the police are involved with other folks in government agencies, and they look at people who've been arrested over and over again on drug crimes, and eventually when they become a frequent enough flyer, they say, oh, well, either this time we're going to give you a felony charge and put you away for a long time, or you're going to go into treatment. And we know that there's people who are out there who have addiction problems who need treatment. They shouldn't have to be arrested over and over again. We met a person we were cop watching. He said, I can't get into treatment. So the money's going through the police bureau to help treat people that they have arrested over and over instead of helping everybody. The service coordination team, next slide, has the last statistics we have, 52% of the people targeted by that program are African American. But the most shocking statistic, I think, was that last year, in an area of Portland that's become very gentrified, right around this area, a little bit to the west, up Killingsworth, around the Albina area. They decided to do a quality of life program to try to take people, arrest people or confront people who were drinking in public. They had an open container, they had a paper bag, sitting on walls, loitering, all sorts of quality of life, nothing violent, I have to say. I believe there's only one or two things that had anything to do with a gun or other weapon. The people who were arrested for that, next slide, 89% were African American. In a neighborhood that's been gentrified, there's a very high tension in the neighborhood about the movement in of white people, and African Americans seem to have been unfairly targeted. The one area where there is a disparity, but not as bad, is what we call the Sit-Lie Law. It's known as the Sidewalk Management Plan now, and officers approach people on the sidewalk and say, you can't sit on this part of the sidewalk during this part of the day. Next slide, please. So the statistic we had for 2011 showed 11%, still out of whack from the 6% population. 11% of the people approached were African American, and it's mostly homeless people, the statistics show also. And it's 7% in 2012, but we haven't got all the statistics for 2012. They stopped being shared with us. Commissioner Fritz was in charge of that. She's kind of washed her hands of the program. We're trying to get a hold of the statistics, and hopefully somebody from the Bureau can help us with that. So that's statistically where we're at. Now I'm going to tell you a couple of quick stories. I don't know how much time I have left because I lost track. We have, next slide please, sorry. We have an oversight system in Portland. Donna made a little reference to it. Independent Police Review Division is the professional staff that takes in the complaints about police misconduct, and then if they decide that the case is worth investigating in order to ask questions to police officers, they have to turn it over to police internal affairs. If the outcome of that investigation is that there was no misconduct, a person can appeal the finding to what most people call our Citizen Review Board. This is called the Citizen Review Committee. It's a 9-member board that hears appeals. So there are 2 cases right now pending through the system. One is a woman, Ms. Haynes, 4 foot 10 inch tall, African-American woman, dark skin, and she was approached by an officer or officers who were looking for a 5 foot 4 inch tall Latino man who had been rifling through mailboxes in the neighborhood that she was in. And they grabbed her backpack from her and searched it, and she filed a complaint. And the IPR and Internal Affairs did investigations around the search of the backpack, which we found out a policy, I should add, and a couple of other things, but they never investigated whether the initial approach, whether looking for somebody who looked one way, was of a different gender, a different height, and a different color, was inappropriate. And to me, it's a form of racial profiling. So, oh, well, it's a person of color, that's good enough, right? So that case, the CRC didn't ask for any further investigation, but there's going to be a full hearing on it in the beginning of next month. There's another case, Mr. McCorvey got off a bus downtown near the Fred Meyers up on Burnside. And he walked across the street talking to a woman that he said he didn't know. An officer approached him and said, hey, what's going on? Are you pimping? Is that one of your girls? He said, and through it, something led to the officers searching Mr. McCorvey, found a medical marijuana pipe. He said, oh, is this to smoke crack? And at some point, the officer made a remark about the fact that Mr. McCorvey lived in public housing. So Mr. McCorvey filed a complaint about racial profiling and about the seizure of his medical marijuana pipe, rudeness, and a couple of other things. IPR turned over to Internal Affairs most of the allegations, other than the racial profiling allegations, saying they didn't think they could prove it, on one hand, and on the other hand, that they asked him repeatedly, what about this was racial profiling? And in my mind, I'm saying, you mean other than accusing a person of being a pimp, saying the person they were is a prostitute, saying that their marijuana pipe is a crack pipe, and saying something about their public housing, other than those stereotypes that would apply to this man, what was racial profiling about? And the CRC, which is right now down to 7 members who are all white, and one of them made a remark, if I was walking across the street, I wouldn't be asked if I was pimping, voted 5-2 to have that allegation investigated. And the IPR said, not only will we not investigate it, we don't think you have the right to ask us to investigate it. So we have these disparities, these disparate numbers. Some efforts are being made to change them. We have this oversight system that isn't doing the job it needs to be done. I want to just go back to the previous slide, if you can go a page up at all. Just looking again at these numbers, just think about that. And what I'm hoping for, and I'm going to leave you with a little piece of good news, I guess, that the police have started a training, and they started with lieutenants and above, about institutional racism. And at this point, it's intended to make it so that officers of color inside the Bureau are better understood by their fellow officers. But we're hoping to see that expand out onto the street, and that officers will take that in mind, and there will be less racial profiling, and I'm hoping to see these numbers change over the next few years. So thank you very much.
So I have a question. How many of the people of color, no, let me start this way. How many white people were surprised by those statistics? Raise your hand if you were surprised by those statistics. Okay, not very many. How many of people of color were surprised by those statistics? Not anybody. Oh, one person was, okay.
I thought it would be more.
So, let me say that this is not unusual. I have been racially profiled myself. And when I was racially profiled, it was when I was driving my cars. And there were two cars at the far end of the spectrum. I normally wear my hair about a 1/4 inch long, and I was driving a Mercedes sports coupe. And have been pulled over several times. Now, it might have been because I was going a little fast, but I'm sure that is not the case, because I don't do that. But I thought it was interesting, because I used to drive a Volvo station wagon, and I never got pulled over in my Volvo, but in this Mercedes I did. And then a few iterations later, I was driving a Toyota, which, because of its age, it was now a hoopty. And I was wearing a Kofi, and had a cracked rear light, and got pulled over by a policeman. I was on my way to work to teach. And being me, I said, hey, look, you have nothing else to do but to pull me over, a little old lady, to pull me over for a cracked light. And he says, well, this is very dangerous. I was right, okay. He thought I was a dude, and I know that. And that's okay. People of color are accustomed to it. It's not so much the being pulled over, it's the life and limb that is an issue. And so we are all hoping to get resolution. Like I said, it is much better than it used to be, much better. So we are working on improvement of that to another level. Our next speaker is Mike Reese. He was sworn in as Chief of Police for the Portland Police Bureau on May 12, 2010. Mike Reese began his law enforcement career as a Multnomah County Deputy Sheriff, where he served on the acclaimed safety action teams in Columbia Villa, Rockwood, and David Douglas. He transferred to the Portland Police Bureau in 1994 as an officer when mid-Multnomah County was annexed to the city of Portland. Excuse me. Throughout his tenure at the Portland Police Bureau, Chief Reese worked in a wide variety of leadership assignments within the Bureau, including the Tactical Operations Division, Transit Police Division, North Precinct, and the Youth Gun Anti-Violence Task Force. He also served as the captain of the Drugs and Vice Division, where he oversaw successful investigations that culminated in the arrest and convictions of numerous members of illegal drug organizations. Chief Reese has a long history in social service, including coaching youth sports and shelter and housing services for the homeless in Portland. Chief Reese served as a counselor program manager and as the director of the Lentz Boys and Girls Club from 1983 to 1989. He is a current member of the Board of Directors for Transition Projects and a past member of First Christian Church and Irvington Community Association Board of Directors. Chief Reese is married with 3 daughters, and in his free time, do you have free time?
Yeah.
In his free time, he competes in triathlons. He is committed to a leadership style of collaboration and building trust with the community the Police Bureau serves. And I might add, he's also a local boy makes good. He went to Roosevelt High School. I present to you Michael Reese.
I appreciate Donna's kind words about my background, but she left a couple things out. I want to provide some context for my remarks so that you know who I am and what I represent. To begin with, I did graduate from Roosevelt High School. We moved to Portland when I was 7 years old when my parents divorced. And my mom brought my two younger brothers and I to Portland because we had relatives here. We lived in rental units and all over the city of Portland. We moved. We were very poor when I was young. Ended up in North Portland and grew up not too far from Columbia Villa. And so I spent a lot of time in that neighborhood. Went to Roosevelt High School and then Mountain Hood Community College, where I saved my parents thousands of dollars in tuition by dropping out to join a rock band. So I thought I was going to be the next Carlos Santana, but that didn't work out as I would hope. And I went back to school, graduated from Portland State with a degree in psychology, and then later with a master's in public administration. I did work for the Boys and Girls Club for 6 years in southeast Portland, and then became a deputy sheriff in 1989 with Multnomah County. I do have 3 daughters. 2 of them are at Wilson High School. I coach basketball for the women's program there. My wife, Cindy, is here tonight in the red outfit. And I feel very humbled to be here to have an opportunity to discuss what I believe is one of the most important topics in our community and in policing right now. How we treat people as police officers matters to me. It matters to our officers. It matters to me as a police officer, matters to me as chief, matters to me as a member of this community. I expect our officers to treat everyone with respect and dignity. Having said that, we all come into this conversation with our stereotypes and our own biases. I have mine. I suspect that you have yours. Police officers are like everyone else in the community. We are human. We have stereotypes. We have biases that impact how we police. We need to acknowledge that, and we need to know how our individual stereotypes and biases impact how we do our job. It's very important that we do that. We make mistakes. As police officers, we make mistakes. As an organization, we make mistakes. I make them too frequently, and they show up on the front page of the paper. But you know, I think it's really important that when we make mistakes, we acknowledge that, and that we find ways to become better as an agency. In 2009, Chief Sizer came out with a plan to address racial profiling. And in that plan, we have 4 strategic initiatives. First and foremost, we want to create a bureau that reflects the community we serve and the city's diversity. It's something that we have been talking about for as long as I've been a police officer. We've always wanted to diversify our workforce, and we've never been able to do it for a variety of reasons. One of the most important things when I became chief was to change that dynamic. I was committed to not just saying those words, but measuring up to that statistic, and that we put some benchmarks. I told our human resource director, Sean Murray, that I wanted to hire 30% people of color or women. And the Bureau Director for the Human Resources Bureau for the City of Portland said, there's no way you're going to be able to do that. I bet her dinner, and 2 years later she paid up. And Yvonne Decker took me to dinner because we had hired 40% of people of color or women in the next year. Now, that good work was not done by my police. It was actually done by people in our personnel division, and one of them is here tonight. I saw her sneak in. Deanna Wesson, are you here? Would you please stand up? Because this is... That was very quick, Deanna. Deanna and the other members of the personnel division have taken that initiative and brought it to reality. And if you have come to our hiring ceremonies in the last 2.5 years,
you've seen people who are highly qualified, who look like this community. So we are moving forward on that. It is difficult, given the budget situation facing the city of Portland. We are losing police officers this year, 50 positions in the mayor's budget. In an organization where the last in are the first out, those new hires, we could have lost them. But the mayor and our city council were committed to keeping them. We have vacancies in our organization that will take some of those vacant positions and lose those. But we have bridge funding from the council and the mayor that says we want to keep these new hires in this organization, and we know that we're going to have to right-size the organization over time, so we're going to have bridge funding so we don't have to lay off those very good officers. The second initiative that Chief Sizer came up with was to give officers concrete skills to help them on the street. Because how we police matters to you, and it matters to us. As Dan shared with you statistics, we looked at those and we saw in our training that we probably had made some mistakes. When I was a brand new officer in 1991 or 92 going through in-service, we had an attorney come in and teach us legal skills, and he was talking about mere conversation, and that as police officers you could engage anyone in conversation, and you could ask them any number of questions like, can I search you? And it was very effective. We searched a lot of people. I think at the end of the day, we probably pissed a lot of people off because we were searching people that we really didn't have any sense that they had committed crimes. We were simply searching because we had been trained that this is how effective police officers take guns and drugs off the street. So I used to arrest a lot of people with drugs on them, arrested a lot of people with guns on them, but unless you're looking at specific criminal behavior and have reasonable suspicion, you're going to capture a lot of people in those searches that you probably didn't want to capture. So we've gone back to the drawing board, and as part of the Chief's initiative in 2009, we taught officers that there are other indicators that you need to look for, not just can we search. And so we've got to start looking at criminal behavior, criminal indicators, rather than just using mere conversation as a way to search people. So that's one of the areas where we've given officers new concrete skills to help lower that search rate so it's more effective. The next initiative was to reach out to the community to develop good relationships. I believe that community trust is a perishable commodity. It's something we constantly have to work on. That's why I'm here tonight. It's why Pat Walsh is here tonight, and Greg Stewart, and other members of our organization, because they care. We have been working on building relationships. It is not perfect. It's not where we want to be. It's where we're headed. It's a journey. We want you to be there with us. The last initiative was to collect and analyze the right data on police stops. We could talk about data. We could argue about the data. At the end of the day, the data matters. We want to present it to you. We want to talk about it. Greg is a sergeant in our statistical services division that looks at that. Greg is an expert on it. He's one of the certified smart people we hired in the organization. And he can talk about the reasons that data might look skewed. But at the end of the day, the data doesn't matter as much as how you perceive us. And your perceptions, are we doing the right thing, matter more than the data. So I measure the data, but I'm going to hold myself and our department accountable at the end of the day by how you feel about us, because I want you to believe that we're doing the right thing. So police organizations are constantly evolving. Just like other professions, the medical profession 20 or 30 years ago did knee surgery a lot different than they do today. We police differently than we did 20 or 30 years ago. We are hiring people differently than we did 20 or 30 years ago. There used to be, in the hiring standards, you had to be 5'9", you had to be able to bench press so many pounds. do a lot of push-ups and sit-ups. Today, we look for people who are diverse, who bring new skills to the table, who are educated and highly qualified to do this job. Many years ago in our training, we wanted to know, could you shoot straight? Could you drive fast? And now we're doing things a little bit differently. In our training, we want to know, can you make the right decision? We do scenario-based training so that we measure and are able to watch an officer, we videotape that training and watch an officer and critique it with them so that they can see how to make the right decision. We've, as Dan said, we've worked with the Human Rights Commission and Police Community Relations Committee on equity training, because in this community, and not just in police, but in this community that I grew up in, and many of you grew up in, there's been institutional racism. It was eye-opening to see that training through that lens. It changed, we had all of our command staff go through that training, and it was transformative. It changed people's viewpoint on how we approach issues of equity in the Portland Police Bureau, through our policies, our training, our practices. The next step in that training is to take it to the sergeants and then to the officers. And we're working with and through that committee to do really good work. The last thing is on policies. Certainly our policies have evolved over time. They're constantly being changed to meet community expectations. Some of those are changes that we've recently made. Yesterday, I was invited by Senator Merkley to join him at a press event where he highlighted the new policy from the Portland Police Bureau on milk expression. They love us. The women that were there celebrating with us as an organization said this is at the forefront of policies, and it's a police bureau doing it. And Senator Merkley was highly complimentary of our policy changes. In another area that we're changing our policy is use of force. We're looking at making sure that officers know community expectations on use of force, and that when we use force, we use the least amount that we need to make that whatever we're trying to do legal, and that governmental interest, we want to make sure we're doing the right thing and that we're meeting your expectations, and when we don't, that we can be held accountable. So those are some of the policy changes that we've gone through. So what are some of the things that we've done recently at the Police Bureau? Well, we've improved diversity hiring. We've done the equity training for command. We've created a diversity inclusion leadership council to help us develop policies and practices and training that support equity in our organization. And so the last thing I wanted to talk about is where are we going? Because it is a journey. We're evolving. We are changing as a community. And this is, I really appreciate Donna and the folks that have sponsored these talks. Many of our police officers went to the race talks last year, and they came back and they told me about them. And so I called Donna up and I said, I want to be a part of this. I want to be a part of this conversation because it matters to me as a police officer, it matters to me as a chief of police, and it matters to me as a person who lives in this community and who's family in this community. So the concept of procedural justice is relatively new in police work, but it is a concept that is a foundation that we're going to build on as a police bureau. It's about treating people with respect and dignity and having equity as a lens that you look at all of the work you do. We're going to use the Department of Justice Settlement Agreement as a roadmap to improve community engagement, improve our policies, improve our training, improve our practices. We're going to have baseline surveys by the University of Chicago to measure your satisfaction with Portland Police Bureau. And this is a unique survey that we are participating in Many police departments across the United States are being selected to do this, and it is an honor for us to be a part of this. The University of Chicago researchers are contacting people who have actually had contact with police and asking them, how did the officer do? Were you treated fairly? Were you treated appropriately? Were you respected? Do you feel like the officer was fair and compassionate? That's going to give us a baseline on how we measure ourselves as we move forward. And then the last thing that I want to close with is I want our officers to be peacekeepers. That means keeping kids, for example, out of the criminal justice system. So we have school resource officers who their primary mission is to keep the students and the staff and the visitors safe at the schools in our city. Their second mission is to help kids graduate and to work with the school district, making sure that those kids walk across the stage after 4 years and they get that diploma. It means that we will work with social service providers to break down silos so that we work outside of our lanes, and that we, in a time when resources are shrinking, that we work as best as possible to provide the best possible service. And Dan mentioned a couple programs in a negative light. I want to flip the view on that, because I think they're hallmarks of good public policy and community policing. Service Coordination Team is an example of that. That was started in 2006 because one of our downtown officers saw that we were simply arresting people and cycling them through the criminal justice system. And we're not going to wrest our way out of drug addiction. These people were going to jail, and they were being back out on the street faster than that officer could get the reports done. They weren't getting into treatment. Many of them were homeless. He worked outside his lane, outside of his silo, and brought together drug treatment providers and housing advocates, and created a pilot program that got people who were addicts into treatment and into housing. That is a hallmark of good public policy. Held people accountable for their criminal behavior, because addicts often steal to support their addiction, but we didn't want to see them locked up for long periods of time. We actually wanted to see them become healthy members of society. On May 23rd at City Council Chambers, you are all invited to come celebrate the graduation of the next group of people that have gone through that program. You will hear from them how successful it's been. Their criminal behavior has been reduced by 91%, and many of them are now living in housing, supporting themselves, and becoming a part of this community. The other program that Dan talked about was a pilot project that was done at Albina and Killingsworth. There was a disparate impact. Officers were asked by that community, businesses, residences, people of color. Dr. Gatewood from Portland Community College was one of the prime folks involved in that. They said, we need your help. We got a lot of problems going on in this community. It centers around this small geographic area. We got people engaged in street drinking. We got people smoking crack and doing other drugs. And it feels unsafe, and it is unsafe. And we met with community members, Commander Mike Leloff from the North Precinct, met with them and said, okay, we're not going to arrest our way out of this problem. We can start by doing probable cause arrests with folks, but what we really want to do is change people's behavior and not have to arrest people. So working with the community, deciding from the community, what do you want your police officers to do? They worked very well in that area, and it is now one of the safest areas in North and Northeast Portland. It is a hallmark of good community policing because we listened to the community, we worked with them on how we wanted to police this, and at the end of the day, we changed the behavior of people. Some of them got into that service coordination team and are now living in housing, and they're free of their addictions. With that, Donna, I want to thank you once again for letting me speak. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight on such an important topic. Thank you.
You You know, I was listening to the chief and I was thinking, we're blaming the police department just like we blame the schools.
Right.
And the reality is that the schools and the police department reflect our culture. And when we change our culture, then the police department and the schools will change. But not until then. And we're the ones who can make that happen. And I like to use this analogy and share it with you because for people of color, we understand this. For many people who are white, you do not understand what white privilege is. White privilege is like asking a fish, how's the water? Fish don't know they're in water. But those of us who are fish and are up on the dock, gasping for air, hoping we can get in, and once in a while we jump in and we go, wow, is this what it's like? And then somebody grabs us and throws us back on the dock. It's hard. Every morning you have to get up and gird yourself to go out and face the world. It is not easy. And I liken it to being in a 100-meter race. Poor white people start at 0, all the way up to the Vanderbilts, who are at 90 plus 97. And people of color go backwards from that 0 mark back to black folks who are at minus 50, blindfolded, laid tied behind their back, carrying a piano. And the gun goes off. And black folks end up, we are either, those of us who can make the race, wind up either slightly behind, even or slightly ahead. And you say, how do you manage to do that? Because you know you have to if you want to make it. So when we change this culture, and that's why I started Race Talks, that's why I want you to pick up those colored pieces of paper and get to know somebody. It's like the congressman who was so anti-gay until he found out his son was gay. And now all of a sudden he's carrying a bill to help support gay marriage. So if that's what it takes, I guess everybody needs to marry interracially. That being said, our next speaker is Casey John. He's the executive director of the Center for Intercultural Organizing. Casey is an original founder of CIO and was born into a nomad family in Somalia. He left when the Civil War erupted and finally found sanctuary in Portland. From 2005 to 2007, he trained immigrant and refugee community leaders in 5 western states, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, Utah, and Idaho, under a prestigious New Voices Fellowship at Western State Center. He has been awarded the Skidmore Prize for Outstanding Young Nonprofit Professionals in 2007, the Oregon Immigrant Achievement Award from Oregon Chapter of the American Immigration Lawyers Association 2008, and the 2009 Lowenstein Trust Award, which is presented yearly to, quote, that person who demonstrated the greatest contribution to assisting the poor and underprivileged in the city of Portland. I present to you Casey John.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. So thank you very much, Donna, and thank you for everyone for coming tonight. Before I start my presentation, I want to talk about a little bit about a couple of things. I think you wonder why a guy with a big, heavy accent is doing here talking about profiling. I think it's a good question, and I will share with you why. But before I start making my remarks, I want you for a minute, close your eyes. Try for a minute being someone who doesn't speak English or speaks badly. You're working in a convenience store, you're a cashier. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and you've been approached. By the time you open the till to give a change, someone who bought a bag of potato chips, there's a gun in your head. You've been handcuffed and taken to a back room, interrogated, asked a lot of questions where the money is, on the process being stopped. The robber is left, you're handcuffed behind your hands, behind your back. You call the police. You dial 911. You ask help. In a matter of a few minutes, officer is rushed to your convenience store. They help you uncuffed, and as a responsible employee, the first thing you did, although you're bleeding, you don't even know you're bleeding, the first thing you did is to call your boss to tell that the store has been robbed. The first thing that your ear hears while you're on the phone is a police officer shouting to his other police officers, "Get that end of the phone." That was me years ago. And it took me 4 years to share that experience because I was only in North America 4 months. It wasn't in Portland, it was another city. But that was my first experience with this side of the world, dealing with police as a young man. I'm still upset and angry about it, although it was years ago, because I believed it. I wish the robbers come back and the police leave. And I'm still upset today. That was my first time. And many years later, my experience with the police has not changed. So let me say this first. Not every police officer is a racist. And not every racist is a police officer. Being said that, then you realize that then what's the problem? What is the issue? The reality is that I come to learn as a black man who's living in this part of the world that race matters. How people perceive you, how people talk to you, and how the systems of justice, or you can call injustice, deals with you is based on your race, your culture, your ethnicity. I come to learn when I was back home in Somalia as a refugee. I used to believe that racism in the United States is over, long gone. It was something that used to be practiced in 16th, 17th century. Believed that everybody was equal and everybody is provided equal and under the law, equal rights. I learned the hard way. That's not the case. And many of my community members that I work with learned the hard way. That's not the case. So rewind that and let me share it with you. Last time profiling happened to me. It was last month. It wasn't important. I was driving from the coast. I was driving in Uber. And as a responsible now, understanding the issues of race, whenever I'm coming across small towns, I slow down, make sure that I'm on the right line, so the fast cars can go to the left line, make sure that I watch my speed, and make sure that I don't violate any traffic rules. As I did that, I was passing downtown Newburgh. I suddenly saw to my left shoulder a police cruiser passing through me. When he was parallel with me in my car, he realized that who was driving next to him. He hit the brakes so fast, and he did those police maneuvers that you see in the movies, almost hitting on my bumper. And by then I knew it was a matter of minutes or seconds before I did stop. So I prepared for myself. I will ask the white members in this room, imagine, how many of you come and think about how can I be safe in this situation and be alive and go home with my children? That was what was going on in my mind. I want to be with my children tonight. I pull over when the lights are on as a responsible driver. make sure the first thing I did, put my hands on the wheel, steering wheels. So there will be no misconceptions, what I'm trying to do. When the police officer approached me, the first question he asked me, do you know why I stopped you? And I looked at him and I said, no, officer. And he said, well, your tax expired. And my tax, by mind you, says on March 2015. So I still try to give a benefit of that for the officer. And I said, officer, unless my tax fell from, you know how usually you just put on top of the other ones when you get the new ones? Unless my tax fell from my blade, I think my tags are okay. They're not expired. He insisted that my tags are expired. So I said, officer, I'm going to go to the golf compartment and now I'm going to pull my registration and my DEQ form. I open it and pull it and show the DEQ form that says expired March 2015. And the officer said, well, DMV record shows still your tax are expired. And for that moment I looked at him and said, officer, no, you and I know that. You just racial profile on me. And he insisted, he did not. And I said, well, good night. Is there anything that I can do for you beyond this? Am I free to go? And he said, yes. And I departed. That was a month ago. Another incident that I want to share with you is that, and this is not about me, about 2 years ago I was driving in northern Portland, actually northeast Portland, on Broadway and 7th. That's a Kinko store right there. As I come to the light, I saw 4 young black men, youth actually, walking on the 7th. As I waited the light to open, I saw a police cruiser coming behind them. The police cruiser immediately almost hit them, go over the curve, and blocked in front of those youth. I believed by their looking at them, the youngest was probably maybe 11 or 12. The oldest one probably maybe 16 and 17. Immediately the officers came out, 2 officers came out of the car, they cornered the youth, and within a matter of less than a minute, another cruiser with 2 officers came out to support the other police officers. I decided to circle around and I backed on the Kinko store just to observe what's happening. I observed, 20 minutes later, the young men were let go. And you know what they did? There's a Taco Bell right on the corner. That's where they were going to. Got out of my car, got after them, and while they're on the line waiting to be served, I stopped them and said, why are you being stopped? May I ask you? And they looked at me and said, because we're black. That was their response. So I want to share with you this because one is that profiling has extremely impact on human beings, people of color. There's psychological issues and questions, and those youth, as I said earlier myself, it took me years even to talk about, to share with someone my experience, because I was ashamed. If you are white in this room, I want you to think about, go home tonight and think about those. So that's the business, why I am in this business, trying to address the issues of profiling. Because I made a commitment to myself. I have 2 kids who are biracial. And I want to make sure that I live a world that's better for all, not some. And I want to make sure that the community of color and immigrant refugees get justice in this country and this world. I have no business. I don't take hostage. I'm going to offend you tonight. I'm okay with that. I lost everything because when I left in my country. So I'm going to challenge you, and if I offend you through challenging you, I am okay with that. I'm in peace with that because I have nothing to lose. So every person of color in this room, or I would say majority of the people of color in this room, particularly the African American, know what it's like to be stalked, know what it's like to be profiled. The issue is not we can convince people of color racial profiling exists. The issue is the majority of this room tonight, who are the majority of them white, you are the one we're trying to convince profiling exists. And it's you who join with us who can make profile to stop. So with that sense, I want to completely go with you a little bit about what the Center for Intercultural Organizing is trying to do. First time we got involved in racial profiling was 2006. My mentor and my champion, Joanne Harris, is over there, who championed this issue for many years. She's right there. Joanne and I joined forces in 2006 with the Oregon Action Center for Intercultural Organizing, Northwest Constitutional Rights, Portland Police Bureau, Northwest Federation of Community Organizations. And as we're doing tonight, we did want to do a dialogue. We did the 5 precincts here in Portland, we did community police dialogue. We asked the officers not to wear a uniform, we asked the officers just to come regular clothes. And we discussed and have a dialogue. After 45 officers participated and 267 community members participated, we drafted this report in 2007. That led us some of the recommendations that Dan Handelman talked about it, and the police chief Chris referred to. But yet, we still today have a profiling. So, my agency last year decided, well, what about if we address this issue statewide? Because we know it happens in other parts of the state too. So we convened a coalition of community members to come together to see what we can do. And our community members start working with the State Senator Chip Shield, Jackie Dingfelder, Representative Dembro, and we drafted a bill that we believed it addresses this issue, Senate Bill 560. This bill, if it's passed in state level, has 3 or 4 components. The first one, it defines law enforcement. It includes all the police, it includes sheriff's departments, it includes college campuses, police officers. It covers almost every single law enforcement that you can think of. The second piece is that we are a business of community solution. We're not a business of trying to figure point. So what this bill does is that, number one, it prohibits the police officers to use a profiling based on host of ethnicity, race, gender, sexual orientation, homelessness, political affiliation, religious affiliation. And as our organization's name, Center for Intercultural Organizing, we're in a business of inclusion. So when we propose this bill, we want to make sure that every community that we believe that interacts with the police and sometimes being targeted by the police needs to be addressed and needs to be included. So although it's addresses race, it has all the other issues that I mentioned and more. So it's a very, very inclusive bill. The second piece, or third piece this bill does is allows also the law enforcement officers to get a training, cultural competency training, every 2 years. It also gives the oversight on the Attorney General to analyze complaints by the community to the police, and it creates a mechanism that ways that the community members can complain and file complaints. So this bill is very broad, but we need your support. Right now, currently, we potentially might be having an informational hearing at the first week of June at the state capitol. We need you. We need the police chief, Chris. We need all of you who are sitting here. I have provided the chief a copy of the bill. I hope he will support. But what I want to tell you also, one thing that the bill will not do it. The bill will not end profiling, period. But this bill will give us the tool, or give the community, give a tool that will allow the community members to have a ways that is this accountability of our police. And we want to support our police department. But we also want to be held accountable. Finally, also, without the community, let me conclude this. Just before we launched our campaign a few months ago, we called the community members. We said, we're going to launch this profiling campaign. Let's get together. About 100 people come to our office who are from walks of life, from all the ethnicities you can imagine. And you know what we did? We put a mic in the middle of the room because we want to see what we got, what we're dealing with. And we asked the community members after we explained what this bill is going to be, and we need their support, we asked them, can you please tell us your experience and profiling? And we were expecting, as staff members, as we're talking about, we were expecting potentially, who is going to talk? Who's going to open up themselves and share their experience? The community members went one after another. More than an hour, each one of them counting their experience of profiling and how they believe they've been profiled and how they've been humiliated. So finally, my friends, my neighbors, our community who is here tonight, I'm asking you, go back to your home tonight and have a conversation about profiling and talk about how do we improve our community, not for some, but for all. But more importantly, if you have the energy, if you have the time, please join with us this effort, and I will encourage also Mike Chris to join with us. We are hosting every third Thursday at our office, Center for Intercultural Organizing. We're hosting a campaign to end profiling. We are asking our community members to come to strategize with us every third Thursday, 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. at 700 North Killingsworth Street. So there's a flyers here. Please take one and join with us. And finally, let me rewind here 1 minute. I will take 1 minute and I will stop there. Let me tell you something, my friends, my colleagues. If you've not been enraged or angered by how some of our community members are experiencing in this community as it deals with race, you know one thing that I call this city? This city I call, how many of you watch Portlandia? Raise your hand. Or know what I'm talking about? Right? There's a Portlandia and there's a Poorlandia in our city. My commitment and my ask to you is that tonight, final conclusion, is that 5 years from now, we want a police that's accountable to the community that it represents.
We don't want to wait that long.
Juan, you're absolutely right, but I'm going to be realistic here. Profiling also breaks down the trust of the police and community. It really builds a barrier. We want to break that barrier and I want to ask you tonight to continue to have the race dialogue, whether it's health disparity in race or whether it's police profiling. This city needs to address the racism that are embedded in this community, and we are afraid to talk about. Thank you very much.
Okay, I see some people getting ready to leave. Did you fill out your evaluation form before you go, Ms. Police Officer? Did you fill out your evaluation form? If you don't have one, I just happen to have some extras right here. So, pass those back, please. Thank you very much. I would hate to have to tackle that woman running out the door. Okay, we have 12 tables, and we have our facilitators. With the facilitator at each table, please raise their hand. Okay, we've got one there, we got one there. We need somebody over here. Mr. Curtis, would you like to be the facilitator? Thank you very much. Do we have one here? Joanne, you're it. Okay, over here. Mr. Hardesty, you're it. Do we have one here? Okay, we do. How about over here? Waiting for the folks to come up. What I forgot to mention is that these cards are part of a documentary that's being made called Safe and Sound. You guys remind me of the 6th grade class I had in testing today. Come on now. All right, so these cards are for a documentary that's being filmed. It's collected by artists and community organizers in Portland, Oregon, who are concerned about the Portland Police Bureau's routine of excessive force and other methods of intimidation. Safe and Sound is a collection of stories about police brutality and resistance to police brutality in our community using video, audio, and photography. And there is a reception on May 18th. And the video installation and website launches May 18th to July 6th. The reception is Saturday, 5 to 9, May 18th. And where is the reception being held?
It's being held at the Place Gallery, which is at Pike Place
Oh, I see.
Market.
All right, it's Place Gallery, Pioneer Place Mall, 3rd floor, atrium building, 700 Southwest 5th Ave. So I hope you can come down. All right, so each group is going to do a less than 1 minute feedback on what, you only get one thing, not everything. Just share one thing that you would like for the audience to know. Okay, and so could everyone please pay attention up here? Thank you. Go. Start on that end.
Okay, our group's conversation largely centered around accountability for the police department and the credibility of the accountability agencies holding the police department accountable.
Thank
Am I correct, group? Yes. Thank you.
All right, our group spent a lot of time getting to know one another, and so we didn't really get to engage the conversation as deeply as we would have liked to. So, but we recognize that there is definitely a correlation between training and hiring and police profiling. Some of the feedback, first of all, is about not understanding what procedural justice means, and so needing to get more interpretation in terms of what you're saying and what we know, or experience, or so things like restorative justice are concepts that we understand, but didn't hear. And having more people in hiring that actually reflect the people who live in the community, and in leadership. So, and we didn't discuss this, but what I know is happening in other places is having people from the community being a part of the hiring and looking at the training. We have a wealth of resources, and they should be utilized. Thank you.
Similar to the first speaker, our group's number one suggestion was a stronger police accountability review board with real authority and more of a watchdog agency from the outside. And our group also talked about and supported the idea of the state legislation that the Center for Intercultural Organizing is supporting, something along those lines.
We had the police union, and I've got pages of notes. But just briefly, and to stay positive, talked about the role the union could play in a positive manner on this issue and ways in which it could work to help reinforce some of the work being done. And then, of course, there, like I say, was a lot of different opinions. So.
My group also had police union, and we talked about the credibility of allowing the community to come in and directly talk to the union so that they can get feedback from the community so they know what's really going on other than looking at the statistical data and just going off of that. So.
Okay, so my group talked about there needs to be a continuous feedback loop between the community and the chief, and then the chief and the training officers and command staff back with the community. And that communication needs to be open and include training. There's other stuff, but that's the system.
We wrestled with what is the correlation between the hiring of command and training officers and racial profiling, and we kind of figured that the important part is training on the street, and when an officer has been on the street a long time in certain areas of the city, they sometimes see a lot of crime and automatically racial profile, because that's what's happening in their community. After a while, after they've been on the street a while, they get a rookie as a partner and begin to train them. And what do they train them in? Their philosophy, and they also evaluate the rookie. And this is an inherent problem, I think, in all police departments in the country. I don't know how to solve it.
Okay, our task was to talk about how to build trust in the police department, and a couple themes came out. One of them was that the positive things that the police bureau are doing aren't getting to the public, and the training we're doing, equity training we are doing, and some of the training of training officers is not getting out there. And we do have a couple citizens that are helping us, and they don't call themselves ambassadors, but I do, and they are going out and talking to resistors in the community that resist this relationship with the police, and they're talking to resistive police officers because there's resistors on both sides. And so we have a couple peace ambassadors. I won't point them out, but Damon and Emma are here, and they are doing that work. And it's good because we need to get the resistors that aren't here in this room and get them a little closer together.
Our group as well addressed the trust issue, and we talked a lot about having the community be educated about policies, about laws, so that when 4 young black youth get pulled over, they know how to communicate with the police. And then also, again, as John said right before, is that hopefully the police officers are getting training in how to work with different diverse groups and how to talk and how to engage us in discussion. So, that's what we're doing.
Our group talked about a lot of really good things. One of them was this issue of statistics and how they're used. And the question that we have is just, how comprehensively are we tracking? Can't hear you. How comprehensively are we tracking these numbers? We understand that this is a police bureau that has an older system. Obviously subject to the bureaucracy of, there's limited funding, and it's probably a real pain for these officers to have to fill out real detailed reports on every single incident. However, we do want to see those numbers, and if it becomes a burden to provide those numbers, then obviously it becomes a burden for us to actually assess what's going on in the community. I'll just leave it at that.
I'm up here representing the best table in the room, the Cougars, the Mighty Mighty Cougars. We were given the question, what discipline do you think should be meted out to police officers regarding infractions of regulations and racial profiling? And we did a good job of getting to the underlying, the experience of shame that the youth are having in Portland, people of color, the power differential of being rousted. And so one of the cool things that came up out of this was the discipline that should be handed out to an officer who gets caught doing racial profiling. First of all, we have to understand that there's no mechanism to catch them, and then there's no consequence if they do get caught. But if this world was existing, we would recommend that the officer go alone into the community to the victim, and that he make an apology to that victim, to the generation of elders above that the victim, and to the youth below. And that if the people signed off and felt that it was a sincere apology, then that officer should be able to return to duty. And so, it's the idea of power, right? These people have been victimized, and now they get to hold that officer accountable on a one-to-one thing. And the children will see about that serve and protect them.
So the passion in this room.
Can't hear you.
The passion in this room is really touching to me. And we had a particularly passionate woman in my group who kept saying, but what can we do? What can we do? She was particularly interested in what she could do. And so we looked at what are the most leverageable things so you can get less overwhelmed. And we looked at changing a policy, changes in procedures for discipline and accountability, and shifts in culture. And also one thing that hasn't been mentioned is community observing. And I didn't know, but learned that CopWatch has actually been training cop watching for years now. And you said about 200 to 300 people have been trained. So please go ahead and add if I don't have it all, but it's a training program that will provide citizens the tools and the knowledge to actually observe on the street in a way that is lawful and does not interfere with what the police need to do lawfully as they investigate possible crimes. Thanks.
Our group had question 4, which was regarding the type of community relations training that we think officers should receive. It was a good discussion. We had the ideas of there being some more training for nonviolent communication, for officers to attend race talks. We learned that there are some groups of intergroup dialogue, intercultural dialogues happening within the ranks of the police at this time, and that is hoping to increase awareness and understanding among themselves about their cultural differences. And another idea that, and also some information that came up, was that sometimes officers are in particular communities and they begin to build relationships with that community, but then they seem to get moved out and the community doesn't understand why they are moved out. It seemed like things were going well and then someone else comes in and then maybe they get moved out, but there isn't a continuity and that relationship being able to be built. And also that some of the things that were cited as things that the police are doing that are positive things are also things that the community have been doing themselves to help people in a similar fashion, and that if police officers were in the community long enough, they would be able to build those relationships with those agencies and communities and organizations that are already there helping the community and would be able to assist people that they encounter that need that kind of help. And last of all, it needs to come from the top.
Thank you.
Our question was, what discipline do you think should be meted out to police officers? One of the things that I think started out the conversation is we must find a way to acknowledge the racist blind spots that classes of privilege have before we can enforce policies based upon the responses. So there was a lot of reference to the justice reports and things like that. The problem with much, as we were talking about, it was much of the profiling is that it may not even be aware to the police officers that that's actually what's going on because of our own blind spots. So one of the things we thought could be part of, and this is not speaking to people who are overtly profiling, but is that part of both the training acknowledges, requires participation in story and experiences of people so that there's a chance that officers can actually experience that from the perspective of those who have been harmed. And is that time? All right, let's call it good at that.